For joining us, everyone. This is our first Tableau Prep user group of the year, and we've got 2 exciting sessions for you. But before we dive into those, I'm just going to run through a couple of intro slides, which many of you will be familiar with if you've been to one of these before. Is this anyone's first Tableau Prep user group? If you want to throw in the chat, if it is, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we jump into the sessions. This is being recorded. It will be posted to the Tableau Prep YouTube channel, but it will also then be embedded in the Bevy page. So if you give us a couple of days after the event, then you should see that appear there. Great to see that we've got some first-timers here today. And as the presenters are going through their sessions, if you have any questions for them, if you could use the Q&A box, which you can access along the toolbar at the bottom, then I just want to make sure that's all set up properly. I'll enable that for you now. If you ask those questions, then we will allow some time at the end of the session for each presenter to answer those, and then both AJ and Hui will be around for each other's presentation. So if there's things that can be answered during the chat, then we could do that as well. But as a reminder of the leaders of the Tableau Prep user group, with myself, I'm based out in the US in New York, so I'm helping to support with this session today. We obviously, if you're unfamiliar with the format of the Prep user group, it's more of a global event rather than a regional event. And so we alternate the time zones that this is focused on. So today is a Americas and EMEA focused session. And then every 2 months we alternate to have the Americas and APAC, or the Americas and EMEA. We have Jenny, who is based in London. I think Jenny might be here somewhere. I know she's not feeling particularly well today, which is why she's not co-hosting with me, but she was very interested in the sessions today, so she's here. And then we also have Jared Flores, who's also based in the US like me. Both Jenny and Jared are Tableau visionaries and great people to connect with. Very prevalent in the community, so highly recommend reaching out to them. Talking about community, we have Tableau Conference coming up in just 2 months now, which seems to have come around really quickly. If anyone has submitted a speaker session, you should be hearing about those in the next few weeks. But tickets are on sale right now. I believe there is still some early bird pricing. So if you haven't secured your ticket yet and you're interested in doing so, then I would recommend jumping on that as soon as you can, because as those early batches of tickets sell out, the prices will go up. So if you're thinking about heading, then I will be there. I will see you there. I might be speaking, I might not be, but I'll be there regardless. So yeah, if any of you are going to be there, it'd be good to connect with you. But that's all I was going to cover today. As you know, as you've RSVP'd, we have 2 great sessions for you today. We have Hui talking about managing version control in Tableau. And then we have Dr. AJ Womack joining us from the state of Missouri, who's going to be talking about how they, at the state of Missouri, have streamlined a bunch of telecom billing by utilizing Tableau Prep. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Hui to talk through how we can manage version control in Tableau, which I know is a particularly hot topic for many firms.
Okay, so thanks, Jack. I'm trying to share my screen, but it's disabled again. Please hold.
Sorry, that's probably because I'm sharing. Let me just turn mine off.
Okay, great. Okay.
There you go.
So,
We can see
there
that.
we go. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Hui. I am talking about managing risk control and topic prep flows today. Um, so just some background about me is that I got a bachelor's degree in mathematics from UC Berkeley, and I also got a master's degree just last year from Harrison Long Beach in applied statistics. And I've been working in dynamics for about 10 years, And for the first 4 years, I was a researcher in an academic setting. And for the last 5, 6 years, I've been working for the Department of Navy. I started as operation research analyst, and then I got promoted to data scientist, and currently I'm a senior data analyst. Um, so I just want to say a few words about Tableau Prep is that it's instrumental in my career. I really hope that Tableau will continue to push this product out and make it better. Um, and there are a few ways that I can explain to you. For example, Tableau Prep allows me to directly look at that data, and by looking means like it's really allowed me to look at that data. So early on in my career, I used Python and Pandas a lot to clean up to the data wrangling data. One of the problem I always had was that I had a low count value. So let's say we have a categorical data field, and so a lot of times I need to group them into groups so that I can do better predictive analytics. If you have low count values, sometimes the model will come back. And during data wrangling, I have to do visualizations and just to see what the cows are on each category. Um, and it takes a lot of time. So, and then it's over Tableau Prep. It allows me to quickly look at the local values without doing any work. And so I love it. Also, let me see that data format. So usually you cannot see this with just like pandas if you have a lot of records. But with Tableau Prep, yes, I can do that. Another thing that allows me to do is to find out hidden outliers. So we all know what outliers look like, right? So let's say you have 1, 2, 3, and also you have 10, and that's outlier. Um, but in real world data, you have hidden outliers. So another example that I could think of just very recently is that let's say you have salary data set, right? And you have the administrative department. Usually the salary is $100,000, but if you have someone suddenly have $200,000, that's an outlier. But if you mix up this salary with other salaries, let's say software engineer salary, then you cannot see it using just traditional histogram. Um, but with Tableau Prep, I can easily click on each department. I can quickly identify what outliers with each department. And so that's why I call it hidden outliers. And Tableau Prep really helps me see through this. Um, Another benefit of Tableau Prep is that it allows me to model very complex data problems and metric calculations with a flow-based approach. And in SQL and Python just cannot do this because it's just a text based, right? It's just from start to finish. But with complex data problem, a lot of times you want to know where to start, where to end, what happens in the middle. So, uh, and thanks to Tableau Prep, just recently I saw a 30-year-old metric calculation problem in naval operations simply because I was able to look at the data and model missing data in it. Um, and the last thing is that Tableau Prep allows me to streamline communication with subject matter experts just by explaining how calculations were done. So I got lots of audits, and they always ask me like, how did you come up with this metric? Because we use a different formula for different publications. So, and the last thing I ever want to is to pull a Python script into a notebook or a SQL script to explain to them because even myself, I get lost in it. And also, a lot of times the code just doesn't run. So I swear that yesterday it ran perfectly beautifully, but today when I talk with them and show them, it just doesn't run anymore. With Taco Prep, this never happens. Um, I can quickly pull up the flow, click on this, click on that, show them exactly the steps that I use to calculate this with all documentation. So that's great. Because of this, I always try to push um, my limit with Tableau Prep. Like, what can I do with Tableau Prep? And one of the things that I have noticed is Tableau Prep doesn't have version control. If you work on anywhere from mid-sized large-scale project, let's say Python project, you have version control. So why not having this with Tableau Prep, right? Um, and so that's exactly what we're going to talk today about. Um, so I'd like to just say what
Oh,
we're talking today.
hi, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Is there any chance you can get closer to the microphone? I know some people are experiencing some audio issues.
Um, I have to plug in my headphones. Sorry, guys. Just give me like 10 seconds.
Okay, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. I know you're in the flow of things, but I want to make sure people can follow along.
Uh, so can you guys hear me better now?
I'm not sure if the audio has changed. You might need to change the settings on Bevy.
Okay. Um, I can increase this. Hopefully it works better.
So if you go on the like Bevy tab of the session and then just change your microphone, I don't think that has changed.
Okay. Microphone. Is it better now?
Uh,
Or-
Not sure.
Okay. I think I'm just gonna move a little closer to.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, and then with other people, I think just turning your audio up has definitely helped mine.
Okay. Um, I'm moving very close to my microphone now, so I hope that it's people can hear better.
Thank you.
Okay. Uh, all right. Getting back to this, I would like to give you like, I mean, military or government, like we have something called a bluff bottom line up front, meaning that whatever you want to say now, just say it so that we know we don't get lost. And I'm just gonna give it out here. The problem is that version control is essential for important Tableau projects, but Tableau doesn't have a method to do proper version control. And so this it leads to collaboration challenges, debugging difficulties, and increased debugging risk. A solution I propose is to integrate VS Code and Git into your Tableau workflow or version control system on top of files. And so there are a couple benefits to this. The first benefit is that it keeps track of changes from version to version. We're gonna understand what it is real quick. It allows to revert to working version if something goes wrong. And three is that allow collaborations between multiple Tableau analysts. And last but not least, something I think very important is that it paved the way to career promotion. Um, so if you're a Tableau analyst, right, I think a natural career progression is that you become so-called analytics engineer and later becomes data engineer. Um, and so if you step into the software engineering role, you definitely need to know VS Code, Git, and Bash scripting, along with Python and SQL. But I think VS Code, Git, and Bash scripting is probably more important that because you need to collaborate with people a lot. So if you learn how to do this type of thing along with your Tableau journey now, uh, it will help you get there faster, and also you gain great respect from software engineers, right? They don't like drag and drop, they like command line. If you can showcase that you know how to use VS Code Git, and they will really like what you do, and you can just talk to them better. Um, some basic first control, just to bring all of us on the same page. Let's say I have a document that says Alice wrote this line, and then I share with Bob, right? And Bob says that Bob wrote this line, and then at the end of the day, Alice changed it from row to right. So Alice write this line, and this is the current version. So what a version control system allows you to do is that you can always collaborate on the latest changes, which is the 3 star, the current version that you see here, and then allow you to track changes. So you can go who changed row to right, Alice in this case. Um, and then there's also you can also revert to previous versions. Let's say Alice doesn't like right anymore. She wants to go back to row, so you can easily roll back to the previous version. And there's also other benefits. So because of a lot of benefit like this, we want to bring into Tableau Prep. Um, what is the a method of doing this? And the only reason why I bring it up, this naive method up, because we do this a lot, and I personally did it a lot too in the past, is that um, I have multiple versions of the same file, and I just put a different timestamp on it. And if I want to make some description, I would say certain thing like, oh, in this case, I have Alice, and then I have the Alice and Bob combined, whatever it is. And obviously this doesn't look right. But I guarantee that, I mean, if it's late in the day and you have no better option, let's say it's 5 p.m., I'm so tired, I have no other option. This is probably what I will do if I don't have voice control. Um, Obviously, it doesn't look right because the next day when I come back to this, I look at a bunch of flows like this, and I may ask like, what version did Alice calculate the total monthly orders? When did she aggregate the data? Is it in February 6 or is it in Alice Bob combined? Um, and also, if Bob sent Alice the file, is there anything new in Bob's flow? Because Alice did some work, right? And then there's also Bob's work. So how can I quickly see the changes? Um, and so if we think about it, what do we want? We want that only one file, but a copy of it is distributed between multiple developers. Uh, and that's why we use Git, because this is exactly what Git does. And the ability to track the changes, like for example, what did Bob add to the files? Um, and for example, I have here a Superstore sample flow that I got straight from Tableau Prep. And if I just add something, a tiny, like you see in the red circle right here, if I don't circle in red, it's almost impossible for you to see it, right? So you want to quickly identify this one is the change that someone made. And so if you think about it, the idea is that if you can, in some way, have a plain text description of your flow, so maybe something like this is the input, this is the step, this is the union step, this is the join step. So something like, oh, there's an input called orders style 2015. There is some union in the flow, etc. So the way to do that, and there's a way to do that in Tableau workbooks and Tableau Prep, which is to follow this manual approach to do it. And so, uh, and we're going to demonstrate right here. So let's say that I have this. I'm going to bring it to this like this. So this is a Superstore, right? And if I follow this step, I will be able to extract a text-based representation of this flow. So first, I save it as a package flow right here, a TFLX, and then I'm going to go there and I rename it to zip file. So I'm going to rename it to zip file like this. And then I'm gonna follow step 4, which is to unzip the file. So I'm gonna do extract all and extract it. So this is my Superstore unzip. And then go to step 5. It says that look for the flow file and rename it to txt. So basically, just add a txt extension in it. And now if I double click on it, this is the text representation of the flow. So it looks scary, but it's not really it. If you look carefully, let's say that I want to spy order east, and which is one of the inputs, right? Orders right here, and that's exactly what it says right here. This is order east, and it's an input node, and and uh, and underneath it, it will list a bunch of like these are the data fields in this input. Um, and then it also says that this is an Excel-based file. Uh, so the goal is not to read everything. The goal is to quickly identify what changes were made, right? So we're not gonna do this. We're gonna use a script to quickly automate this steps. And then we can use VS Code to look at the changes. And this is what I'm going to demonstrate next. So I'm going to switch to VS Code now. So, right, first of all, I'll go back to this. I'm going to add one more steps to it. Um, like a tiny step, and we're just gonna say that we added this step. I'm gonna just put in a bunch of smiley face here, and I'm gonna save it. Uh, and so again, I'm gonna extract a package flow um, right here, and sorry, I'm just gonna uh, switch back to my VS Code. So again, this is a text representation of it, right? And now if I save this as a package workflow, I'm gonna save it like Superstore TFLX. Save. Okay. So now instead of going through all of the steps that we did before, all I have to do is just type in this script, superstore.tflx. So what it does is that it's going to go through this, it's going to extract, uh, uh, yes. Sorry, it's this. Oh, oops. Sorry, I didn't plan for this. I think maybe there's a problem here. So I'm going to do it again. Sorry, guys. So I have to remove this too. 1 second. Okay. All right. Let me remove this. Export. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to do git tab.sh, which is the script I wrote to automate all of the steps, and then put in the TFLX flow. Okay. So now it just extract the text from me. And this is where VS Code is useful. If I click on this text, I click on Open Changes, then it will quickly identify changes for me. So, for example, this is the step that I added. So if you recall, right, in here, I added this step, I added a bunch of smiley face right here. And so basically I don't have to read everything. I just use VS Code to tell me that this is the step that something that I added. And this is the description. I just put in something nonsense, but you can put in something more descriptive. And if I have any calculations in that step, it will always show here too. Um, and so that's about it. Um, so I just want to recap real quick. What we talked about today is the version control with Tableau Preps using VS Code and Git, right? And the idea is that to extract a text-based file. There are a couple of benefits, and I think that we should embrace this workflow more. Um, if you want some more resources, I did write about this on GitHub. That's the link there. In that, I talk about how to do a full setup with Mac and Windows, and more detailed explanation of why version control is beneficial. A walkthrough. I really wrote exercises there so that we can walk through it. And also, if you do Git a lot, there's something called merge conflict. I also propose a way to handle merge conflict with Tableau flows and Tableau workbooks as well. And if you want to connect, that's my LinkedIn. I share a lot of tips and tricks on Tableau Prep and some lesson learned as I'm implementing this approach at scale at my company. I will share that on LinkedIn as well. But that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great session. I think far beyond what most people are doing for version control in Tableau. There are a couple of questions. So a question from Chloe: could you use the same techniques for working on the workbook itself outside of prep? So I think that's talking about developing in a Tableau workbook rather than a prep flow.
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question. So,
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to promote the people that have questions. So, Chloe, you can ask.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering if you can track the changes in the similar way by downloading a packaged the packaged workbook on the actual Tableau site as opposed to just in prep.
You can. because a package workbook, even are you talking about prep flows or a Tableau desktop file?
Desktop, sorry, yeah, Tableau desktop.
Yes, you can. The GitHub version that I resource that I had up there talks specifically about Tableau Prep workbooks. I'm sorry, Tableau desktop workbooks with all the
Okay, thank you.
exercises and the code and everything.
Awesome.
Okay, another question from Venkat. One sec. There we go. You can ask your question direct.
So the question is, does the version control just stores the code or will it save the front end visualization? So the text base is about what happened inside the file, right? So when you do a full Git workflow like Git add, Git commit, you also want to commit the Tableau flow file alongside with the prep, alongside with the text file. And so that way, everyone will be able to have the flow when they do Git clone. Hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. And then AJ, I know you have a question, so.
Oh, I was just asking a question because I think Finn put a question in the chat and then it was answered by Eric. So I was just making sure that it got solved. But yeah, it's good. It was the question how to integrate VS Code into a Tableau workbook, and yeah, Eric wrote an explanation for that in the chat.
So VS Code is just it's used to manage. I think I gave a demo, right? But basically, what VS Code does is that it facilitates Git and it also allows you to see changes. Now, I'm not sure what you code by code you mean like Python code or the script that you write. Is that right, or am I misunderstanding you somehow?
I think the question that was put in the chat originally was how you would integrate code more generally to a Tableau Prep flow, which is where people have spoken about the scripting step.
So, sorry, again, sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Jack?
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't a question for you. I was just saying that someone had put in the chat around integrating code more generally to prep flows, and it was answered in the chat. So I think there was a bit of discussion there, which is great.
Okay.
Let me just see if there's any other questions. Yes, there's one more question in the Q&A. You'll be able to see it. Have you seen differences in the flow file when people are using different versions of Prep Builder?
Yes, that's what you're referring to is called a merge conflict. And in the GitHub resource that I put up in my slide, it discuss specifically how to handle merge conflict when it comes up.
Perfect. Any other questions? No, just thank yous. Okay. If there are no other questions right now, then we're going to move on to AJ's session. But if you do have questions that spring to mind, feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and Hui will be able to get to them and answer in the chat. And as I mentioned, the session is recorded, so you're going to be able to go back and recap what was presented if you're looking at implementing some of these techniques in your own work. So once again, thank you very much. And we'll pass things over to AJ.
Yeah, I think there was one more. It asked if Hui could post his link, his GitHub link in the chat as well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, if you could just do that, Hui, that would be amazing.
All right, I'll get started. Hey everyone, welcome. My name is AJ Womack. I am a data specialist here at the state of Missouri. I'm in the Office of Administration, and I am in the Division of Information Technology and Services Division. So Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, there's a lot of Missouri people here, so shout out to all my Missouri peeps for coming out. Appreciate y'all. But yeah, here's a picture of me, what I look like when I had hair. This picture's getting old now, so it happens to the best of us. But yeah, I'm a data specialist. I have a background in, gosh, lots of stuff. So education and then academia. And when I was in academia, I fell in love with data science. And so now I play with data, and it's great. So the problem that started with the Division of Social Services, yeah, rip my hair, amen, is that so Missouri Office of Administration, they send out an invoice, a monthly telecoms communication invoice for about $200,000 monthly. And what is possible is that if they can tie together both the location and the employees that are tied to that location, to that invoice bill, they can actually recoup a fairly substantial portion of that invoice back. Previously, they were doing this manually, where they were looking at these 800 lines of this invoice and associating it with a location manually, and then associating it with a person. And so it was a very labor intensive process. So what's cool is that within DHSS, they have these things called P codes. And in these P codes, this is a very specific description. And so if they can show, if they can prove that they have these P codes in this location, then they can reclaim a portion of those telecommunication bills. As you can see here, there's lots of different locations across the state, over 800 different lines and locations across the state. And so with a $200,000 bill monthly, that can easily become, if you can do this right, you can save the state a good chunk of money. Well, recoup a lot of money and then use those monies to better serve the people of Missouri. So what they needed a solution that both tied the invoice location to the employee reporting categories within that locations, and so that those grants could be claimed. And the biggest part of this is that, for me, is that this process needed to be handed back off to the users of DSS. So once we developed it here in-house in IT, our goal is to kind of kickstart these projects and get them back out the door to the department owners. And so in doing that, and so thinking about that as for our solution, that was one of the reasons why we went with Tableau Prep. I don't know if you guys know, but within the state of Missouri, Tableau is our enterprise solution, both for visualization as well as data prep. So we have a whole bunch of users in and across the state that use Tableau Prep. And so that's why we went with a prep solution here, because we knew that we could hand it off to someone within DSS who had those prep skills. All right. So if that was too much, if you just wanted a simplified version, we have 3 different reports that we need to marry. So we have our telecoms invoice, we have our lease IDs, and then we have our employees. And so our goal was to actually come up with a crosswalk. So we used a subject matter expert at DSS, and she put together, so anytime we had an invoice location, I'm like, what lease ID is this? And they were able to give us that. And so using that was the crux of this, that we had to develop that crosswalk. And once we had that crosswalk, we were able to tie both the bill to the location and the people within that location. And so what we did is we put that within a flow. We made it work, and we also put a whole bunch of data checks in place so that we can quickly identify both where the mismatches were. Like, we have a number on our bill that isn't anywhere on our crosswalk, and so that's part of the process, and just a whole bunch of different ways that things could fall off potentially, and we're catching those within the flow. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see, next slide. I'm going to switch over to my flow. So here's the flow. As you can see, we have our data sources. Here we actually have our 3 data sources. Our LOC RC lease. This tab here, this is actually developed in-house within DSS, and this has both the location and the employee data in that. And so they were able to combine that into one. And so actually we're pulling in three. So we're pulling in our location and employee data, we're pulling in the crosswalk, and then we're pulling in our, this is for March 2024. So I'm pulling in an older version. Yeah, so this is for March, or this is our invoice data. So as the flow kind of goes through, and I was going to spend a little bit more time on just discussing the flow and how it works. The first things first is that we want to know what the total for the bill is. So I just have a quick aggregate up here. And as you can see for this bill here, it's like $198,000 or $198,198. And so that's a pretty substantial phone bill. So we bring that across, we clean it up using some things, and then we do then we pull on our crosswalk. A lot of these data contains phone numbers, so I'm not going to share it because it's being recorded. But as you can see here on this, we do an inner join, so we're grabbing everything that is both on the crosswalk and on the bills, and so that kind of gets passed along through this middle line as it goes across, and that's what I'm kind of using as like my good data. And anything that kind of deviates off of that line is bad for one way or the other. So here we have our cross. Here our data is good. So then we do a left outer join, and so that's pulling in all of the leases, the locations that were billed but weren't on the crosswalk. And this has a nice little aggregate function. This is empty because we've actually matched up all of the lease IDs and added those to the crosswalk. And that's the first step of this. So we look through, we check this first step, we see, okay, how much money are we actually losing to this mismatch? And then we have like a little output step that says, hey, add this to the crosswalk. So that's a pretty cool, that's a nice little feature that's catching. That's one of our, troubleshooting steps. We also have bad lease IDs. Basically, these are IDs, and this is a full step because we filter it out. And we filter down to not include. So on the crosswalk, I can show this real quick. There are some lease IDs that are like labeled no longer here. Or they have some or different things like that. So we can actually see those here. So whether it's across ITSD or if it's across DSS, or these IDs are no longer in this location, right? They're identifying those as bad lease IDs. And what's nice about this process is that allows them to also go back to the telecoms company and say, hey, stop billing us for this because we're not using this anymore. And so we keep track of that here. A fun little step that I use here is that I aggregate up to the total amount, one for each basically invoice number and lease. And then I also do just one across the entire invoice of these numbers. And so that allows, so notice that these are joining up on one. So I just basically create a row called one or a column called one, and I'm joining up on that. And that allows in the long run to add both the total number for that invoice line as well as the total of the mismatch. We're not summing this, and so it's fine having all this, but this kind of gives the end users within DSS, okay, how much money are we actually losing off of this, and helps them act accordingly. So that's that. So that's that step. And then as we move along, we're then aggregating this down to one row per location. And so we're summing up the total. A lot of these lines are duplicates because they have multiple. Locations have multiple lines because they're charging multiple phone numbers and whatnot. And so here we're just aggregating it up to one row per lease ID, and that's super helpful. Yeah. So Chad, couldn't those joins just be LOD calcs since they're supported now? I don't know if you noticed that my Tableau Prep might look a little different than what you might see in 2024 point whatever is out now. So here at the state, because we have an enterprise solution, we ask when we're on-prem on our server, we are several versions back. And so I think right now we're still in 2022.1 20.3.4 is our version. And so we're not quite there yet. I know there's a lot of really cool features that we're missing out on at the state, but that requires a lot of work in both upgrading our on-prem server as well as getting everyone at the state the most recent version. We're actually going through a process now where we're actually going to be shooting up towards 2020.4, but we're still in the middle of that process. So good question. So another part is, so sometimes we have subs that are on the bill that aren't on the lease or information or employee information. So we grab that information here. We're missing about $747 from that. So that's known and that's kept being tracked of. And so everything up to this point from what we lost is now we're down from the 198,000, we're down to 164 because we've lost some money here, we lost some money here, and that's fine. And then we bring in our employee numbers, and so these are our P codes that tell who is at what location. And one thing you might see is that it's going to be one row per. In this case, it's one row per P code per location, and so we need to aggregate that up. And so we do a join step, we clean it up there, and here's where it gets kind of fun as well. So here, what we're doing is that we're looking at those P codes, and we're seeing like how many P codes are in each location. So here, if we look at let's say P19. It's going to be further down here in this clean step. So if we go P19, we can see that there's 2 people there. So we know that at this location, there's 2 employees using this P code. And so that's really important. I also did a split down here, and this is looking at the dollars per location per P code. And so that aggregate looks a little different. And so we're pulling in a different aggregated field. But it also pulls, so that pulls in. So by location, by lease ID, how much are we actually charging? And so we label those appropriately. And if we look here, we're still sitting at that 164. So this is just another check to make sure that we're not losing any money anywhere on anything wonky. And then we join across those. We do lose some steps here because one thing, we don't have P codes at these certain locations, which I think is pretty interesting, which they've been fixed, but we were missing out here. I think if we just click on this, we can see that we're missing out on about $179, something like that. And then that's our final clean step. This kind of puts it into a format that they like. And so we get it exactly how they'd like to send it up to the feds. Then we check our last aggregate. So we're actually collecting about 163.96 from this. And so what's nice about that is I actually keep a separate little cheat sheet. So we kind of knows this is off the aggregate that's at the start. So we know that we're pulling in 198,000. This is what we aggregated at the end. And so my goal is to figure out, based on what we know we're missing from those other checks, do these 2 numbers line up? And then in this case, they absolutely do. From those items that were all across DSS, we can actually recoup like 40% of those. And so we're actually, so out of that, roughly $200,000, we're monthly, in this case, we're recouping 88% back. And so that was a huge increase. Let's see. Switch over to my presentation. Oh, it's being funky. Did the wrong one. Okay, here we go. So this is our return on investment. So basically, we're accurately categorizing about 97% of the invoice lines. In this case, we're keeping track of all of them. We do know where they're dropping off. So those 3% is like saying like, well, we're just not accounting for them, but we know where they're dropping off from one error or another. And so that allows us to actually recoup about 88% of the total invoice. And so that's roughly $172,000 monthly, about $2 million annually. Previously, this was being done by hand. And so they were probably pulling in close to, like, they told me 80 to 90,000 monthly. And so we're nearly doubling that. And so that's a giant increase for the state of Missouri over the year. It was also a very time intensive process. They were 15 hours monthly easy on doing these manual, hand checks on all of these different sheets. And as you can see, I went through it basically in 30 minutes. And so they're saving 180 hours of work annually, which is phenomenal. And so not only does it save time, it saves them, it allows them to recoup more money. And one of the biggest thing is that it didn't cost DSS anything. I mean, my FTEs is covered by ITSD, so they didn't have to buy a new product or do anything like that because Enterprise or Tableau is our enterprise solution. It's awesome. It only took about 3 months of development, and most of that development was just like getting new data in to make sure that there was no wonkiness on how they're pulling in their new data. So it's basically just making sure that the data that the reports that they were going to be using in the future were the same. Also, it eliminates human error, so there's no fat fingering. You know, you're like, oh, 1, 2, 3. It's now typing in the wrong number. So it's pretty cool. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. My name is AJ Womack, aj.womack@oa.mo.gov. I'm pretty proud of this. I was able to save the state of Missouri about $2 million annually. I think the first question people ask, well, like, do you get a percentage of that? No, all that money goes back to DSS, and so they can do their social work and serve the citizens of Missouri. So the fact that I was able to save them makes me pretty proud. So yeah, I guess from there we'll just move on to questions. Does anyone have any questions? I have a question about large data set. Tableau Prep automatically samples when handling large data. Yep. Due to performance concern, however, sometimes I want to maintain the original data size and avoid sampling. Do you have any good solutions for this? Yeah, and so you can just force it. Let me open up a new prep. Let's see. What doesn't have data on here that's not going to. Here, like this data here. If we look at this lease ID, so on the settings, on the sample tab, and this might look different in different versions. On the most recent version, just heads up, you can use all the data, but know that that will affect performance. So if you're pulling in all the data, you might just run out of RAM. I've seen it happen with machines that have 16 gigs of RAM. They're pulling in millions and millions of rows, and then it just ultimately just hits a spot where it just dies on them and it crashes. So if you want to use all the data, you can just make sure you have the RAM appropriate for it and that your machine can handle the performance needs that it takes to generate all the metadata that is in Tableau.
There's another question, AJ, about debugging prep flows, and if you recommend any resources that would help understand the errors in prep flows.
The errors in prep flows. Sometimes those errors can be. It just depends. Sometimes those errors are absolutely they're hidden. So you'll try to publish and you'll see an error up here, and then it won't tell you where it's at. So sometimes that happens, but usually if you actually click on the error, it'll tell you exactly where that error is located within the flow. And honestly, I've been doing this long enough that 9 times out of 10, you're joining strings with integers unknowingly. And that's what throws most things off. I know that's silly, but sometimes it happens, especially if you're using a wildcard union, and sometimes that wildcard picks up something that it wasn't expecting to. Let's see. That's way more complex. Do you run this manually each month, or is it scheduled somehow? Great question, Eric. No, in fact, so it's not manually. It is manually run, but it's not by me. So I guess that's the win. So part of this was saying we will kickstart this project, kickstart this solution for you, and then pass it off. And so we've actually passed this off back to DSS, and they run it manually monthly. There are some checks and balances in place, so there's really not an easy way to run it automatically. They kind of run through some things, then they say, well, hey, we need to add. They'll run this output, and this we need to add these guys to the crosswalk. They'll go run it to the crosswalk. They'll then come here, make sure that it's clean. They'll come to this one, make sure that there's no weird lease IDs in here anywhere doing anything it's not supposed to. They'll come up here, make sure that they're not seeing things that are billed but aren't on their locations, and so they'll just go through all of this, and they kind of keep a running tab like this to make sure that they're accounting for every penny, and just like I've done in this one. So it's not really manual, or it's not really automatic, but it's been handed off to the department itself. I saw Jeremy say all data isn't an option anymore. Oh, well, look at that. I have no idea.
Someone's followed up and said all data has been replaced with maximum. So I think there may have been a change within versions.
Any other questions?
You can't. I don't think there are.
Explain now.
I don't see any other questions. How did you group stats with the folder icon?
My headset just kind of went out and back for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So to group, you just grab a chunk, and then there's a group option, and you group it. And what that allows you to do, it kind of makes it its own little folder. And so a lot of the flows that we can generate can get enormous. And this isn't even my biggest flow. This is a fairly small one. But I like to group because it just makes it much more visually appealing. But yeah, that's how you do it. You just grab the objects that you want, you right click on that, and then yep, it's that simple. And then you can remove individual objects from the group as needed. Is that all of them?
That is all of them, unless, oh, no, more trickling in.
What are your documentation practices for these flow external documents, or have a version that uses in-flow documentation features? The documentation is handled, okay, so the solution I had for that is that we have a centralized location where that the server can actually look into. And the way that we deal with these documents is that it goes in that month's folder. And so here, as if you can see, we're actually pulling in the March data. And so these are all within that March folder. And so as new files come up, a new folder gets created. Those files get dumped into that folder, and then the part of the process is just repointing the flow to those specific files within that folder, and then just saving it, you know, with a new suffix on it. Yeah, great questions. So nothing like official. We don't have a ton of data governance, but we're working on it here at the state of Missouri. So.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, AJ.
Great questions. Thank you.
Some great questions and a great presentation. So thank you for joining us today. And that concludes our session for today. Thank you very much again, both AJ and Hoy, for joining and delivering their sessions. We can try, I'm trying to think if there's any way we can get any slides or content out to the group. I'll explore. But the recording, yes, so the recording, let me show you what the recording will look like. If I share my screen, AJ, if you could stop sharing yours, and then I'll be able to share. So the recording gets posted to the Bevy page. So if you take a look back at, this is where you can see all of the events that we have hosted. If you go back to a previous event like December, you'll see the recording as an embedded YouTube link on the page in the next few days. So once we've received the recording from Bevy, we will put it to the YouTube channel, and then you'll see it embedded within the February 2025 page. So Jenny and myself will get that done over the next few days. But otherwise, thank you again, everyone. And we will see you next time, sometime in April. Maybe before, maybe after Tableau conference.